everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports entertainment all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined this week by Taylor Smith. We've given Rick Rockwell a day off today. We launched a new format last week. We're going to keep that going this week. We begin with baseball. We have to start with the Independent Atlantic League this week, which announced this week they will continue to use a robot umpire system for the remainder of the 2019 season. They tested it out at their All-Star game in early July, and the way it works is that the home plate umpire wears an earpiece that's connected to an iPhone in their pocket. A system called TrackMan uses Doppler radar to determine where the ball crosses home plate, and it feeds the correct ball or strike call to the umpire, who then announces that call. And I, for one, welcome our new computer overlords. What about you, Taylor?
Yeah, I think it's ultimately something that can only be good for the game. Just last night, I watched Cody Bellinger get ejected for arguing a terrible strike zone by a terrible umpire. And if I were a paying fan going to a Dodger game, I wouldn't want the best player in the game to be thrown out just because the umpire can't do his job well. So TrackMan seems to have, be getting good reviews so far. I don't know how umpires feel, like if their pride might be a little bit hurt, that their judgment has been taken out of the game to a degree, but fans don't go to the game to watch the umpire throw people out, and balls and strikes are something that shouldn't be subjective. Everyone should have the same strike zone. It should be understood by hitter, pitcher, catcher, everyone. So, it's nice to have a human element in the game. I understand that people like that, but for something like this that should be by the book, that shouldn't be subjective, I'm down for it. I think, it's something that will ultimately help the game. I do like the temper tantrum on occasion. You can see managers kind of, run wild, but, that's a small price to pay for getting the calls right, I think.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with it. I want to see it tested out, for a little bit longer. The Atlantic League's using it for the rest of their season. Maybe we'll see it in the minors at some point, but I think that it's, it still allows for the home plate umpire to use discretion, because one of the things with this system that it cannot tell is a ball that bounces in front of the plate and then crosses over the plate within the strike zone. The system will determine to be a strike because it doesn't look at the trajectory. It only looks at where it crosses. It also can't judge a checked swing or anything like that. So the home plate umpire still serves a purpose beyond just, reading whatever the tracking system tells him to say. Not to mention, balls in play, plays at home plate, all that sort of thing. But I think it's a really good option. I agree with you. The human element's nice, except when it impacts the game in a negative way. Everybody's like, oh, no, but the human element. It's like, yeah, but there's a certain range that's like, okay, that's kind of a nice thing. The one thing you would lose is the pitchers that are so pinpoint accurate that they can expand the strike zone over the course of a game by just working ever so slightly towards the edge. And the umpire kind of just goes, oh, no, this is a strike for that pitcher. So it does take that element away, but in a sense, I don't know that really should be impacting the outcome of a game anyway.
Yeah, like a guy like Greg Maddux, if you look at highlights from his heyday, umpires would give him like half a foot off the plate. At some point, it got really ridiculous. Like, he's great and all. He wasn't overpowering. His whole thing was control. And there's still room for that, even though everyone throws 98 now. But for something like that, the human element, it'll also impact betting. Like, imagine how pissed you'd be if you bet on a certain team to win the game and they've just been screwed all night by a guy that doesn't know where the strike zone is. And Joe West, Angel Hernandez, you can go on down the list. But, it's just something like that. It just should be a uniform thing. Like, the ball's over the plate, chest to belt level, whatever, knee level. It's just, that should be one of the things that's not really human element. I'm fine with not taking the robot thing to the bases. I'm fine with that still being a human thing because they do have replay. And more often than not every time, but replay should get that correct if it is necessary. So keeping the robot thing to home plate is fine with me. I hope it's something we eventually get at the major league level, and I think it's kind of trending in that direction.
I think that at some point down the line, you might be able to do the robot umpiring at the bases. I don't think that this system is the one that would be able to do that. You'd still, again, need a body there to make sure that the ball was like caught. But in theory, you could end up at a point where it would be cheap enough to put a chip into all of the baseballs. But I mean, with how many baseballs they go through in the game, I don't know that that would ever be, at least in the
Yeah.
foreseeable future. I don't know that that would work because you've got to be like, okay, the chip would have to sense that it was caught and its energy momentum stopped by a glove. And then it would also have to sense the base. And they change the bases out 3 times a game now. So I don't know that that's really going to be too realistic, at least in the foreseeable future, maybe down the line. But yeah, with replay, I think that it's, and like you mentioned with the betting too, if someone had bet on that Dodgers game and then sees a terrible strike zone result in the best team in baseball, one of the best teams in baseball, losing one of their best players, that as a bettor to go like, oh, well, this is great. I just didn't realize that Angel Hernandez, Joe West, whoever it was the home plate umpire for this game. I guess I just shouldn't be betting on games if the home plate umpire isn't or is one of the 4 or 5 umpires that tends to always end up trending on Twitter for making a bad call and ejecting people willy-nilly. And it's possible that Major League Baseball might decide to test the robot umpires at some point with minor league baseball. You usually see certain things like they've been using the extra innings with a runner on second rule for a little while now. Nothing appears imminent or in the plans at the moment. But something that is imminent is the MLB trade deadline and then the postseason shortly after that. So starting about 2 or 3 hours after we're recording this, the Boston Red Sox begin a 4-game series at Fenway Park against the AL East leading New York Yankees. Now, after playing 3 games at home against Tampa in the middle of next week, they take on the Yanks for 4 more in the Bronx. They just wrapped up a series where they took 2 of 3 from Tampa in Tampa. So, Taylor, are you ready to write off the defending World Series champs if this next week and a half doesn't go to plan? Or do you think they're going to come out of this 11-game stretch okay?
So taking 2 of 3 in Tampa was definitely big, but before that they did drop 2 of 3 to Baltimore. So it's like this team all season long has just been one that can't get out of its own way. It's the same team we saw last year personnel-wise for the most part, but for whatever reason they just have this lengthy hangover. It's kind of like the Cubs the year after they won it. They were kind of treading water for a long time before they eventually got it together. The difference is the American League at the top is so tough that, the Cubs were able to skate that year, but you can't really do that in the American League. They're 11 games behind the Yankees right now, so the division's gone. They pretty much have to hope for a wild card berth. They're only 2 behind right now, which, that's a very attainable goal, but 8 games against the Yankees over the next week and a half is pretty daunting. Having the first 4 at Fenway does help, but there's just something about this team. It kind of reminds me of last year's Dodgers. Even though that team did make the World Series, it just seemed like something was missing from them, and that's kind of the same vibe I'm getting from the Red Sox. So we'll see. This kind of determines their whole season, I think. I definitely think it's too early to write them off. We still have a couple of months left in the season. Who knows, if they make another trade. They got Andrew Kashner, which that's not really a move that moves the needle for me, but there's still, as of this recording, a few days for them to make more moves. So I won't write them off yet, but the first several months is pretty discouraging if you're a Red Sox fan.
Yeah, I think that they probably need at least, a bare minimum 500 record over these 11. If you wanted to even go back and include the last 3 that they took 2 or 3. But yeah, like you said, they just dropped 2 or 3 to Baltimore. So that wipes out whatever they just did in Tampa, because you can't take at least 2 or 3 from Baltimore, if not sweep them. At this point in the season, that's a negative against you. That winning 2 out of 3 against the Rays is not going to make up for it. But this 11-game stretch that they've got that starts the day of our recording, I think is going to be their make or break factor. If they were to get on the one extreme, if they were to get swept in 4 games by the Yankees, they might have to seriously consider being sellers at the deadline if there's any pieces they might be able to move. because if you drop 4 in a row and you end up being 5 games back of a wild card spot with 3 games against the Rays, 4 more games against the Yankees coming up, you've got to look at yourself seriously. I don't think I would write them off today, but if they don't go at least 6-5 in this 11-game stretch, that's when I would say to call it. That would be, look at the clock on the wall, time of death, whatever for this team this year. It's weird when you look at their numbers too. Their team WHIP is not great. They're the only other American League team in playoff contention that has a worse WHIP is the Angels, and it's a fraction of one. So they do have the second most runners left on base in Major League Baseball, but it's behind the Dodgers. And they've scored the second most runs in Major League Baseball anyway, behind only the Yankees. Third most runs scored per game in baseball, behind the Yankees and the Twins. This is a good team. Even when you're looking at like the WHIP and their team ERA is not bad. The runs that they're giving up per game isn't bad. Like, yet somehow their expected win-loss total is exactly what they currently have. This is where this team should be based on what they've done to this date. And it seems weird because there isn't anything that jumps out as being the why. It's hard to determine what it is that's actually wrong with this team other than the fact that they're just not winning.
Yeah, Chris Sale got off to a bad start. But for the last month or two, he's been himself for the most part. David Price has actually been good. No one talks about him, but he's bounced back in a big way. Eduardo Rodriguez has been the same guy he's always been. I do think the bottom of the rotation with Porcello and whatever we get out of Cashner is pretty questionable. Porcello's been horrible this season, but maybe that's the issue. The bullpen hasn't been quite as strong, but the bullpen last year, if you remember, was pretty bad during the regular season. And then they randomly got hot in the playoffs with Joe Kelly and Nate Eovaldi suddenly becoming unhittable. So, they kind of had that bounce in the right direction for them. But yeah, it's tough to pinpoint. I can't believe they're second in runs scored. That's insane to me.
Bonkers.
They should be. I mean, that's the kind of offense they have on paper, but it just doesn't seem like they should be that high compared to like Minnesota and they're ahead of Houston. So yeah, it's a tough division at the top, but 11 games out of first is certainly not anything anyone could have expected.
No, I mean, they're not challenging the Yankees for the AL East this year. They'd have to win all 8 or at least 7 of 8 in this next 11-game stretch against New York to even have a shot to challenge them. But although watch them do that, we're talking about, maybe is it time to write them off? They'll win 7 of 8 from the Yankees and they'll take 1 or 2 or 3 from the Rays and be in contention for the AL East by, in 2 weeks. But Porcello's been rough. And not having that firm 5-man rotation can be detrimental to a team when that is putting up runs, because if you're not getting some kind of consistency out of that, you're not going to win every start that your top pitchers go out and, start. So yeah, I mean, that's it. That's the only thing that would kind of make sense is that the bottom of the rotation just hasn't kind of held up what they've needed to in order for this team to be successful. But we'll see. There's still time. The trade deadline is yet to pass. There is time left in the year, and they have a good roster. They've got a good team. They're scoring a lot. Yeah, only Minnesota and the Yankees have averaged more runs per game this season than the Red Sox offensively. I mean,
crazy.
And we're talking about a team that's like 4th or 5th in the American League wild card race. Insane. Let's switch to football. We're 5 weeks away from the start of the 2019 college football season. We're going to be previewing the upcoming season conference by conference, looking at all of the Power 5. Sorry to fans of the group of 5. This week, we're going to take a look at the Big 12. Oklahoma represented the Big 12 in the college football playoff 1 year ago, falling 45-34 to the Alabama Crimson Tide in the semifinals. Sooners currently minus 125 favorites to win the Big 12 this year. Texas, the only other team below plus 1,000 odds. Longhorns coming in at plus 250. Taylor, who do you like to win the Big 12?
It's hard not to like Oklahoma. I'm a TCU guy, but plus 1,800 is a little bit long for me. OU's won the Big 12 4 years in a row. They've been cycling through quarterbacks, but each of the last 2 have won the Heisman. Jalen Hurts has a good chance to make it 3 in a row coming over from Alabama. I doubt the offense really misses a beat with that. They still have elite talent at skill positions, but I'm a little worried about their defense. It was not good last season, and there's not really any reason to be that optimistic it'll be that much better this season. I guess, having a second-year defensive coordinator might help. Maybe they're more acclimated to what he wants to do, but that's a reason for concern. I do think there's decent value on Texas at plus 250. Sam Ehlinger was pretty good last season, 25 touchdowns through the air, just 5 interceptions. He scored another 16 on the ground. He's one of the more dangerous two-way quarterbacks in the country. So if he can stay healthy, I think they can have a chance. But Texas has road games at West Virginia, at TCU, and at Iowa State, which is rough. They also play LSU before conference play, which isn't easy. So Oklahoma has a more favorable schedule. I think they're just the better team on paper anyway, but it's hard to get too excited about minus 125, I think.
Yeah, but if ever there was a team to be excited for minus 125, because Alabama's not going to be minus 125, Oklahoma's probably the team from within the Power Five. Hurts should be good. I mean, as you said, the last 2 quarterbacks that they've had have won the Heisman Trophy. And actually, Oklahoma's quarterback has won the Big 12 Conference Championship game MVP, something like 4 or 5 championship wins in a row, which they did away with the championship game for like 6 years. So it's dating back to like Sam Bradford. But they've always had good quarterbacks, at least good collegiate quarterbacks. And Jalen Hurts is a guy who should be able to slide right in there. Kennedy Brooks, their running back, redshirt freshman a year ago, over 1,000 yards on the ground. He should be really good. Their only regular season loss last year came to Texas. They lost by 3, 48-45. They turned around and beat Texas by 12 in the conference championship game. And yet, you mentioned their defense. They gave up over 450 yards per game last year. But my counter to that is they're a Big 12 team. Defense is kind of a forbidden word a little bit. There are teams that play good defense, but they don't have the offenses to contend with the crazy good offenses of a school like Oklahoma. It's when it comes to a regular season performance, ruling out a Big 12 team because their defense is suspect I just don't think that's because every team in the Big 12 has a bad defense, or at least an average at best defense.
It's funny because I remember when the Big 12 was like the ground and pound defense conference. It wasn't that long ago, but now it's just crazy spread everywhere. So, yeah, it's like everyone became Texas Tech circa 2006, and Oklahoma's the best at it. So the defense won't hurt them in conference. It's just the national title thing that'll come back to haunt them for sure.
Right. And when you're looking at the college football playoff, I mean, they were in it a year ago. You got to figure Alabama and Clemson are going to be locks. Ohio State, Michigan, one of them probably gets in. And it really comes down to, everybody who seems to make decisions loves the idea of having another SEC championship game in the postseason. So, Georgia, Oklahoma, probably among the teams that are battling for that last spot. Yeah. I personally cannot stand the idea that a team that could theoretically lose twice in one season to someone within their conference could also get into the college football playoff, which, if the scheduling were to line up for an SEC East team that were to go, let's say 11-1, losing to Alabama in their matchup against the West, could then rematch in the conference championship game, lose again to Alabama. And because they're the SEC, they'd go, oh, they've lost Alabama twice. It's like, yeah. So why are you going to make them play Alabama again? You
should not be able to lose your conference and be in the playoff.
No.
And you should have to be in a conference to get in the playoff.
I agree. My idea on it has been that you make the conference championship games round 1 for the Power 5. You can then seed them like the NFL does, 1 through 6. The 6th spot is not a wild card. It would be the 2 best conference champions that are not Power 5 that would play a 14th game, because they'd have to play a conference championship game for their 13th, as every other school does. And then they'd have to play a play-in game. They're essentially like the MLB wildcard rule. So you might have someone like Florida Atlantic might play I don't know, Toledo. But it would be their 14th game of the season, whereas Alabama's sitting back after playing 13. And then they'd automatically be the 6th seed. That's always been my thought on it. Because if you're not the best team in your conference, and we had this with the SEC on a couple of occasions, where I like to call it SEC math, where a team that finishes 3rd in their conference, 2nd in their division can be 1st in the nation, which is what happened with the LSU-Alabama debacle when they played the championship game a couple of years back. Because I forget who it was that – I don't remember the winner loser in the regular season and the national championship game, but it was reversed. And the team that lost in the regular season finished 2nd in their division, which means that because they didn't play in the conference championship game, they were 3rd in the conference, 2nd in the division, and yet they still played for a national championship and won the game. So
that was Alabama, I'm pretty sure. I think LSU won the regular season game, and Alabama beat them in the title game like 21-0 or something like that.
Right, where LSU didn't cross the 50, and during the regular season, that game was so exciting that neither team topped 10 points because, SEC football. We're going to preview the SEC at some point, but that's a bit of a sidebar. You kind of got into it a little bit where Texas is probably the favorite to face Oklahoma because there are no divisions in the Big 12. So it's just the top 2 teams playing in the conference championship game. Oklahoma beat TCU in 2017. They beat Texas in 2018. Tom Herman's squad, the Longhorns, have been seemed kind of on their way back up. They were 10-4 last year, including postseason losses, 7-2 in conference play. Ellinger's been really good. If he can play the full 12 games, their offense is going to be great. WVU is a random one. They're kind of betting high for a school that just lost their head coach. Dana Holgorsen left for Houston. Neil Brown has stepped in. They were 8-4 a year ago, and of those 4 losses, 3 of them came in the Big 12. I like Iowa State better when it comes to not the teams that are not the obvious of Oklahoma, Texas, as far as being able to maybe make the conference championship game. Matt Campbell's team has been good for a couple of years now. I think they've won 8 games in back-to-back years. WVU, again, they lost their starting quarterback, Will Grier, who was a big part of making that team a threat. Dana Holgorsen left for Houston, and Neil Brown is a first-year head coach. So when you combine the fact that they lost their starting quarterback, they've lost their and they're going to a first-year head coach, at best, I think they're going to be stagnant record-wise. I do not see them playing for like 10 wins.
It helps that they get Texas and Iowa State at home, but they also have to go to Oklahoma, and they go to TCU. It's not an easy schedule. I think Oklahoma State is the team whose schedule sets up the best among those kind of mid-range sleeper teams. They get OU, Kansas State, TCU, and Baylor all at home. So that's obviously pretty favorable. Oklahoma State, that's always another high-octane offense. So, the defense isn't always necessarily built to keep up. But just based on that schedule, they do go to Texas and they go to Iowa State and West Virginia, which is not great. But schedule-wise, I think there's a chance they could sneak through. But it's hard for me to see anyone but Texas and OU, to be honest.
Yeah. It would have to be a weird, like Iowa State would need to beat Texas in the regular season, and it would come down like a tiebreaker. Like where it would be the head-to-head, it would push Iowa State in over them. Oklahoma, I think, is the easy pick to win the conference. Texas is the other. If you're looking for like a value play, if you're going to basically take the slight underdog for every conference, if you're not going to bet the Alabamas and Ohio States and Oklahomas, then Texas is your pick. But I still think Oklahoma wins the conference. I think that Texas faces them in the conference championship game for the 2nd year in a row. Let's shift our focus over to hoops now. This July has been pretty wild already. The FIBA World Cup is no exception. No free agency to deal with here, but the final 12-man roster won't be announced until August 17th. The bigger story here, though, has been the players that are not trying to play for Team USA. Zion Williamson, Kevin Love, James Harden, DeMar DeRozan, CJ McCollum, Anthony Davis have all pulled out already. Team USA still a minus 600 betting favorite to win the whole thing. Serbia, the second most favored team at plus 700. Spain behind them at plus 1,800. Taylor, should people be looking at other betting options besides the United States here? Have they lost too many pieces?
I still think they should be the favorite, but minus 600 is a little bit rich for me. considering those names that are gone. They still have the best overall talent just because they still have a team full of NBA players, which can't be said of most other teams in the competition. So that's good for something. But Kemba Walker's the only player that was on an all-NBA team this past season to be on the roster right now. It's significantly weaker than the teams we've seen at the international level over the last decade or so. Probably the weakest since the 2004 Olympics when they took bronze. So I don't think it's crazy to look at some of these other teams. Serbia has Nikola Jokic, who's better than anyone on the NBA team or the on the American. The rest of the talent is a little lacking, but they still have NBA players like Milos Teodosic and Nemanja Bjelica, Bogdan Bogdanovic. So I think that's a worthwhile team to look at. Less into Spain. Marc Gasol's getting older. Ricky Rubio's fine, but nothing amazing. The Hernan Gomez brothers, they don't have Pau Gasol, plus he's old anyway. So Spain at plus 1,800 is okay. A team I like a little bit as a sleeper is Canada. You can get them at plus 4,000. They have a bunch of NBA players on the roster, potentially Jamal Murray, Andrew Wiggins, RJ Barrett, Tristan Thompson, etc. They're also coached by Nick Nurse, who just won the NBA title with Toronto. So if you want a sleeper that can make noise, I don't see any reason Canada can't be one of the better teams in the tournament. So yeah, I get why the USA is the favorite, but minus 600 is a little too low for me, I think.
Yeah, I'm not betting on them at minus 600. I mean, it's they don't have the. If all of the players who have backed out had not backed out, minus 600 might be a lot more appealing because you're going, okay, their bench is going to be better than a lot of these other countries starting five. But yeah, I mean, Walker, Kyle Lowry, Andre Drummond, Kuzma. I mean, they've got players still on the team that I understand the U.S. being favored, but the minus 600 is just way too steep of a price. I would I kind of agree with you. Serbia was the team that I was going to be looking at plus 700 because they're close enough where you could kind of see it as happening. I kind of like what you were saying with Canada. It wasn't something I'd really considered until we had sat down, but that would be, you're getting, what is that, 40-1 odds on the Canadians to win? I mean, if the Raptors can win an NBA title,
might be Canada's year.
It could just be Canada's year in basketball. We know it's still not in hockey, but that just may not change for a long time. 1993, last time an NHL team from Canada won the Stanley Cup, but it just always had to rub that in. That was Montreal. Toronto hasn't done it since the 60s. Canada at plus 4,000 is interesting. I agree with you. I'm not going with Spain. I'm just not betting on the U.S. If I'm placing a bet, I'm taking a small money flyer looking for a little bit of value, maybe Serbia, maybe Canada, and just kind of hoping that, I'm looking to win dinner. I'm not looking to win a suit. I'm playing with a lot less on it at this point. Although to be fair with Team USA, you basically have to be you have to be wagering like $50 to win McDonald's at that price, and with that roster, it's not worth it. So it not quite as crazy with this kind of player movement as with the NBA's offseason, but at least the international game is at least trying to stay somewhat in line with the way NBA free agency has gone.
Yeah, there's tons of movement, tons of players just not playing.
I don't believe Steve Kerr has chimed in yet on whether or not players sitting out for Team USA is good or bad for the NBA. Did you see his remarks on the Anthony Davis?
Yeah, that's a little rich for me.
I kind of get it a little bit because it's weird seeing players essentially making trades or dictating the movement of players across the league. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to cap player salaries and you're going to, the teams always find a workaround. It's one of those things where I typically will side with the players because of how many restrictions they have. The teams are always the ones that have the workaround. So if the players can find one, I'm cool with them utilizing it if they can. Now, if they're going to say like, oh, technically it's, that they're not allowed to work with one another because, if they're technically working while they're on opposing teams, that gets tricky. And I would agree that that would be a negative because you could then look at it. It's not fixing. It's not, you're not fixing a game or fixing an outcome, but it is, in a way, it's tampering, but there's nothing that says that,
there's no rule against players necessarily privately planning stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's also a little rich for the guy that has presided over the latest super team to claim that one guy leaving for another team is bad for the league when his 73-win team signed Kevin Durant because the salary cap exploded. So, maybe someone else should be the one to speak up.
Yeah, pot, meat, kettle. Let's go on to the UFC. UFC returns to pay-per-view this week with UFC 240 in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Co-main event features Chris Cyborg as a massive minus 650 favorite taking on Felicia Spencer, who's a plus 450 underdog. Very confident, though, Spencer, in some of the remarks she's made during fight week. Cyborg, by far the biggest betting favorite on the card. Only two fighters even touch or top the minus 400 mark. Any reason to doubt Cyborg gets back into the win column here?
No, I think the odds are strong enough to where I wouldn't really want to mess with either side of it. Anyone named Cyborg is probably going to be a favorite by default anyway. I guess plus 450 is favorable if Spencer can catch lightning in a bottle here, but I generally trust the odds makers when the odds are this long, so I'll take the robot.
Cyborg is, she's been one of the best fighters in MMA for a while now, female or otherwise. She's 20-2. She did lose to Amanda Nunes back in December. It was a 51-second fight, but Nunes may just be the best, or at least one of the top three fighters in UFC history, full stop. It was the only other loss that Cyborg had was her first ever professional fight in 2005. So Chris Cyborg is going to win. I'm excited for her to eventually go to WWE, but that's a different topic. This is what I think would be an interesting wager to look for. Only 3 of her 20 career wins have come by decision. 4 of her 5 UFC wins have ended by KO or TKO. 2 of them in round 1, 1 in round 2, 1 in round 3. If I'm going to bet on this, I'm going to bet on Cyborg winning by KO or TKO, because the odds are just going to say that, that's how she wins. And if you think that Cyborg is going to win, the only way to realistically bet is to try to pick either a round or a means of finish. And I don't think it's unreasonable, even in a 3-round fight, to say that she's going to win by knockout or TKO if you are on, if you're back on board. I don't think there's a reason to doubt her even after the loss to Nunes.
Looking for alternative betting options when the odds are like this is probably a good idea in general. And if you can find some kind of edge like that based on the numbers, then yeah, I like that strategy.
Let's look at the main event. Featherweight championship bout between Max Holloway and Frankie Edgar. Edgar a plus 315 underdog to take the title from Blessed, while Holloway is the second most favored fighter of the night, minus 425 odds on the money line. Taylor, again, I don't think either of us see much value betting on the favorite to just win, but would you consider a bet on the underdog, the challenger for the title here?
Yeah, it should be at least an entertaining fight. Both are pretty aggressive typically with their approach. Edgar has a chance if he can take the fight to the ground, but one of Holloway's better skills is defending against the takedown, so I don't really like Edgar's chances of making that happen. The fight should go the distance, which at the very least you can say anything can happen if that's the case. But once again, the odds are such that you either can take a flyer on Edgar at plus 315, or like you said earlier, just find a different way to bet on it, because betting straight up on Holloway on the money line has no value. So I don't hate a flyer on Edgar, a low dollar type of bet, trying to buy dinner, as you said. So there's a path for Edgar here, but it's not a particularly likely one.
Basically, it's Risk McDonald's trying to go to like a Buffalo Wild Wings or something. Yeah.
Or Wild Wings.
Yeah, there you go. Trying to be more realistic when these odds are only, the payout is, 3-1. So, you bet the $5 value meal and you can get $15 for some wings. But yeah, Holloway, 5 inches taller, 10 years younger. He's the striker. Edgar's a wrestler, boxer. But yeah, Holloway, really good takedown defense. He did lose his last fight against Dustin Poirier, but that was in the lightweight division. He's won 13 straight before that. And since 2014, if you're looking to bet on the way that the fight would end, 8 of his wins have come via knockout or TKO, 2 via submission, 3 went the distance and required a judge's decision, all of those unanimous. Edgar, meanwhile, his UFC career started in 2007, so 12 years ago. He's only 3-2 since 2016. He beat Cub Swandon, he beat Yair Rodriguez, and he beat Jeremy Stevens, and then he lost to Brian Ortega and Jose Aldo. I mean, Holloway, I would think, is going to retain. His last time out was in a different weight class. He was trying to become a champ and win his second belt. He's I don't honestly know what direction I would go as far as picking a finish, though, if I'm doing that. Because if you're looking at track record, Holloway is more likely, based on his last 13 wins, to finish and to end the fight with a KO or TKO. But it's 8-5, 2 via submission, 3 via decision, and then 8, finishes knockout TKO. So I don't know that there is an option on that. That's the thing for me is I don't know that this is going to go the distance. Edgar's older, I think. But with a 5-round fight, it's risky to just try to pick a round. That's the other thing too.
Yeah. You never really know when it's going to come to an end, especially if you have a guy like Edgar that, maybe a little more weary than he used to be. So, like I said, it's just kind of a flyer thing on Edgar. Otherwise, you can probably just find something else to bet on.
Yeah. Or do yourself a favor and go on to Twitter and find Mini Blessed, Max Holloway's son, dancing during fight week, because I am hoping at some point that with this ESPN partnership that we get the children of UFC, because if you've ever seen Cowboy Cerrone's kid or Baby Blessed, they're beyond adorable. So I would bet on the Cyborg fight ending in a finish, in a knockout or TKO. And with the main event, I would sit back and enjoy it and just watch the videos on Twitter of the Little Blessed. Which, if you haven't seen that, Taylor, I'd recommend checking that out too, because he's just dancing on the stage during open workouts, which always entertaining.
Just looking uncertain back at his big Blessed. He's bashful. Oh, here he goes.
Kid's got some moves.
He does have moves. He's kind of swaying. Maybe that's his future. Entertainer.
He's already his dad's hype man.
Yeah. It's crazy how much they look alike. Nice. Yeah, that's probably the best thing to watch rather than betting on the actual fight. Just enjoy that instead.
Totally. But for now, that's going to do it for this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Make sure to check out gamblingsites.org for more from him right here. He's Taylor Smith. I'm Drew Goldfarb. Make sure to check back next week for another edition of the podcast on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.